There's a saying that's been part of the hunting world for the last 60 years that states your scope should be at least as expensive as your rifle. That was sound advice years ago because most hunting rifles were about the same price as a high-end scope, but that's no longer true today. Now we have low-end hunting rifles down in about the $400 range, all the way up to high-end factory hunting rifles that cost several $1,000s. The market has so much diversity today that it's impossible to relate a good scope to the value of a rifle anymore. So we have to ditch that mentality entirely. What most experts will agree upon is that great high-end optics for deer hunting become available about in the $1,000 range. And no, your $400 Chinese Arkin or your $300 Korean-made Bushnell is not a high-end optic. So in this video, I'll be exploring hunting scopes in the $1,000 range. Assuming that you're not some unethical, ego-driven hunter that uses deer as target practice at extreme distances, most hunters have a pretty uniform preference when it comes to a deer hunting scope. You know, we want hunting scopes to sit low on the bore, yet have a big enough objective on them to have decent exit pupil when using magnification in low light conditions. You know, the vast majority of hunters find an objective between 40 and about 44 millimeters to be perfect on a deer hunting rifle. You know, most of my deer scopes are 42 to 44 millimeter objectives. Hunters also want a second focal plane scope with a low magnification setting of at least 3 power. Seeing the reticle at low power is much more important to hunters than having high magnification. Many of my shots are actually with the scope power usually on its lowest setting, you know, mainly because I actually go out and stalk animals. But we also want a lightweight scope for those long stalks on foot, which admittedly does induce other issues that I'll explain later on in this video. Hunters usually shoot full power cartridges in a lightweight rifle, so longer eye relief is greatly appreciated. We also hunt deer in colder months, so all those additional layers of clothing are going to push the scope further away from the eye, so long eye relief is really appreciated by hunters. Hunters who prefer rifles with a hinged floor plate for reliability reasons usually hate full-length scope rails that kind of block the ejection port because they want a more open receiver so they can load easier under pressure or with gloves on, and so there's nothing really impeding proper ejection. But this means that your scope tubes have to be long enough to span a long action or a magnum receiver and still achieve correct eye relief at the back of the scope. To tell you the truth, most scopes don't do this well on magnum actions because most modern scopes just don't have enough real estate on the front tube. One of the most important things to a serious deer hunter is glass quality. Deer are mostly nocturnal animals. You know, that's what their senses are made for. And most shot opportunities are going to be in very low light conditions. So glass and lens coating quality can just make or break a hunt, in my opinion. Most tactical scopes lack in the glass coatings department compared to high-end hunting scopes. The next thing we need to talk about is turrets. A hunting rifle is normally slung over our shoulder or attached to a pack. And this creates a high likelihood that exposed turrets can be moved as the scope is rubbed on things. And I've had it happen to scopes before. It's because of this that most hunters prefer capped turrets over exposed turrets. But guys that hunt at longer distances and want to dial for elevation, go for an exposed turret with a zero stop on it. Now, some of the exposed turrets with a locking feature are even better for hunting, in my opinion. Just make sure that the turret is low profile. Otherwise, it's going to constantly snag on clothing, hunting gear, and brush. And lastly, we have reticles. Most hunters who hunt within the maximum point blank range of their cartridge prefer a standard duplex style reticle. Hunters who stretch things out a little further normally want a reticle that allows for wind holds within the reticle. What hunters don't like, though, is busy tactical reticles or reticles that are just too thin to quickly see against a dark background in low light. Illumination is also welcome by hunters on scopes as long as it's not too distracting. You know, as a matter of fact, we just prefer a little dot in the middle of the crosshair. So that's pretty much the attributes of a scope that hunters want. I'll state a few things before I get to the actual scope reviews. First of all, I won't be reviewing Chinese scopes like Arkin and Hawk. And I also won't be reviewing budget scopes in this review, and probably never will. I also won't be reviewing scopes from the plethora of new scope brands that are flooding social media like Maven, Tract, Riton, and others. These scopes get thrown at influencers with reckless abandon for positive reviews right now, but I don't really know about the longevity of many of these new companies who are pretty much newcomers in this highly saturated market. But, you know, Tract may have a future. I know they're actually gaining some momentum in the market. And some scopes in this price range are just way overpriced for what you get. The Vortex Viper PST Gen 2, made in the Philippines, should cost half of what it cost. It's a very overpriced scope. The Swarovski Z3 really sucks compared to the other scopes in this review in the same price range. Other companies like Steiner just really don't offer the type of scopes that we're looking for in this price range at all. Our first $1,000 deer hunting scope is undoubtedly the most popular and best-selling $1,000 scope right now, and that would be the Loophold VX5HD. If you were to take all the criteria for a perfect hunting scope that I laid out in the first chapter of this video, the VX5HD is probably the only scope that meets them all. This is a 3 to 15 by 44, so it has a really great magnification range and it's low profile. They also make, you have an option for capped turrets and a more stripped down version of the VX5, but this actually comes in a little bit cheaper than the $1,000 mark. But we're going to talk about full featured scopes in this review. This is a second focal plane scope, and I think that Loophold offers the best hunting reticles on the market. It also has a simple fire dot illumination that most hunters really like. It has low profile turrets and a great parallax adjustment on it. It weighs less than any other full featured scope on the market. And it also, in my opinion, has the best eye relief of any scope in this class. It also has the best glass of any scope in this price range, period. And to top this off, The VX5HD is made in the USA by American workers, and it has the best warranty in the business. I know what you're thinking. Just in this video right now, this is the best $1,000 hunting scope ever made by a large margin. But not so fast. These scopes are known to have some issues in certain circumstances that make them less attractive than they seem. In the design and manufacture of this scope, Loophold sacrificed durability for ultra lightweight. The scope tubes on this are so thin that if you tighten your rings a little bit too much, you'll damage the scope. And I've already done it with a set of worn rings torqued to 25 inch-pounds. To cut weight, Loophold also uses plastic parts in places where I feel like metal parts should probably be used. And just before deer season this year, my rifle with this scope on it was leaned against this desk right here, and it fell on the floor. And now it has a wandering zero. The scope has issues now. It doesn't pass the tall target test, and no longer, it's way off on the tracking test. So I need to send this back to Loophold. You know, don't blame Loophold for doing this, because Swarovski, Vortex, and others also went down the path of sacrificing durability for lighter weight. Unfortunately, hunters like you and I have driven the market in this direction, and it was a huge mistake. Now, the other issue with the VX5HD involves turret tracking. This scope, from the factory, tracks worse than other scopes in this review. I mean, if you don't turn turrets, it won't be an issue for you at all. But if you do, you probably want to buy another scope. So this is my 35 Whelen rifle build that I did on this channel last year. This rifle originally had the VX5 HD scope on it that broke. But as usual, anytime I suspect an issue with a scope, I throw on one of these Force SHV scopes to verify. And that's how much I trust these scopes. This 3 to 10 by 42 SHV scope is just an absolute tank. You know, they've never failed me, and they just seem to hold zero through anything. You know, it doesn't have all the features that other scopes have. And it's actually really heavy for such a short, bare-bone scope. In fact, it's so short that you'll need a full rail in order to properly mount this on a long-action receiver and maintain eye relief. And these are assembled in Idaho using Japanese glass and all Japanese components. So by law, it has to say made in Japan on it. But the tubes on these are really thick, and the lenses are epoxy bedded into the tube. So it's just bulletproof. The turrets actually track great every time and just don't lose zero. And I got both of these scopes with the illuminated reticle on them. And the fact that Nightforce came out with a duplex reticle proves to me that they're actually serious about the hunting market. The glass on these scopes is just okay. You know, nothing special. In fact, nothing about this scope is really great, other than the fact that it'll never let you down. You just won't find a tougher scope in this price range. A fellow hunter that I really trust told me that the Zeiss Conquest V4 scopes are the best scopes he's ever used for the price. If it means anything to you, he sold all of his Swarovski Z5s and went with the Zeiss V4s instead. So I had to go out and buy one and see for myself. Like the Loophold VX5, Zeiss offers a lot of magnification, turret, and reticle options for this series of scopes. It's very versatile. I got this 44 millimeter scope fully loaded with adjustable parallax and a great illuminated dot reticle on it, almost like Loophold's Fire Dot. But the controls for the illumination are a lot better on this scope. The glass on this is actually pretty good. The turrets actually track true, and the scope has always held 0 for me. I got this one with capped turrets and a number 60 duplex reticle. And I think these capped turrets, might have some plastic in them, and I'm not too happy about that, but it is what it is. Loophold, a lot of others do that too. The cool part about this scope is it has plenty of real estate on the tubes to get eye relief on a long action receiver, which I really appreciate. Overall, this is a full featured scope with great glass for a great price. The only thing I don't like about this scope is that the low magnification power on it is only 4x. I shot a buck with this scope last season at 40 yards, and 4x magnification was just too much. I didn't like that. But Zeiss scopes aren't as delicate as Loophold, Swarovski, or Vortex scopes, but they're also not as robust as a Nightforce or Trijicon scope. And lastly, this is my Trijicon Credo HX, 2.5 to 15 by 42. And I think this scope is an absolute home run by Trijicon. Trijicon actually drop tests their scopes, and real torture tests online always have Trijicon at the top for durability. And I also like that the caps, the turrets, everything's metal on this. There's really no plastic on this thing to be seen anywhere, and I appreciate that. I also love the magnification range on this thing, and the 2.5 power setting gives you a field of view of 41 feet, which is incredible. And like I said, this is a full featured scope with a huge magnification range, side focus for parallax, and an illuminated reticle. I use this scope on hunts where I expect to be dialing for elevation. And the turrets on this track more precisely than most of the other scopes in this review, and the clicks are really positive on this. And also, for an exposed turret, it's actually pretty low profile. It's not that bad. But I really wouldn't want a turret that sat any higher than this. The glass on this scope is a lot better than the Nightforce SHV in my opinion, but it's not nearly as good as the VX5HD in low light. The scope tube also has plenty of real estate, actually gobs of real estate on it, to get eye relief without using a full-length rail, which I really appreciate that about the scope. But the scope is heavier than the rest, and I think it really pushes the boundaries between a hunting scope and a tactical scope. On paper, the Loophold VX5HD is a scope that you just really want to love. It checks every box on what you want in a scope for deer hunting. Never underestimate the value of high quality glass and coatings on a hunting rifle. In my state, we hunt a half hour before sunrise and a half hour after sunset. And most of your shot opportunities are going to happen in those low light conditions. So glass, can be an absolute game changer to many hunters. Although the VX5HD doesn't have glass as good as the Swarovski Z6 or Z8 scopes, it does offer the best glass you're going to get at the $1,000 price point. Unfortunately, for the last 10 years, Loophold has had some durability issues. Loophold is also not held in very high regard when it comes to turret tracking on their hunting scopes, which is why I don't use them on setups that require turret spinning. I really wish Loophold would go back to making their scopes more durable like they did it back in the old days. The Nightforce 3-10 by 42 SHV is a very simple bare bones scope made specifically for hunters. But even though it's basic, it's also the toughest scope that you're going to find in the $1,000 price range. If you need a scope to use as a truck gun, or your rifle is going to bounce around in a side-by-side all day over rough trails, the SHV is the scope you can trust when it's time to take a shot. So if durability trumps everything else, get the 3-10 by 42 Nightforce. The Zeiss Conquest V4 is just a fantastic scope in the $1,000 price range. You know, it's full of features, has very good glass, and there's lots of options to customize the scope from the factory just about any way you want it. I also think that the simple illuminated dot in the reticle combined with these awesome illumination controls make the scope fantastic. But the Trijicon Credo HX is the king of the $1,000 scopes in my opinion. It has great glass, every feature you could want on a scope, 2.5 power low magnification, reliable tracking, and durability that almost approaches Nightforce quality. I think that the extra weight of these scopes is worth it, and it's not a huge compromise in optical performance compared with the VX5HD. If weight savings is really that important to you, you can always create balance by using a lighter rifle combined with a heavier scope like this. If you hunt from a stand or a blind, or you mostly drive on roads while you hunt, or you like to set up over bait or a sendero, a good lightweight scope will last you forever as long as you don't over torque the rings. But if you plan on using a scope in a more abusive environment, or you need highly accurate turrets to dial your elevation, a scope like this is going to be a better fit in my opinion. If I could get the glass and reticle options of the VX5HD and the illumination controls of the Zeiss V4 and the magnification range of the Credo HX, and put that all together with the durability of a Nightforce, I'd have the perfect hunting scope, even if it weighed a few ounces more. Sadly, no such scope exists right now. And as you could see, everything is a compromise. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video about the best $1,000 deer hunting scope. You can reach me with any questions or comments at desertdogoutdoors@gmail.com. Thank you for watching, and as always, good hunting.